I've gone a little bit too far here. The expert fainted in the witness box. It's a really, really awful moment. Those are the ones that really keep you awake at night. And what I would want everybody to remember is it is so worth it when you get there.
Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of But Is It Legal, the podcast from TBD Marketing. I'm your host, Simon Marshall. I don't know why I say that every week. I'm always your host. I'm always Simon Marshall. So there we go. Today, I'm joined by Anna Yarde. And Anna, can you introduce yourself? Tell us a bit about who you are, where you work, and what you do.
Hello, thank you for having me on your podcast today. My name is Anna. I am a family law barrister at Harcourt Chambers. I am a children law specialist, so I do public and private law children, as well as some slightly more niche specialist areas such as deprivation of liberty and forced marriage work.
Amazing. I think we're going to have a great conversation today, right? I think the stuff that you're working on is just so prescient, isn't it? Right? It's really right now, and loads of good conversations. Always the way with children law as well, I think. Tell me, let's go back a bit in terms of what made you first want to become a lawyer. What made you want to come into the legal profession? What was it that first sparked your interest, as it were?
Like a lot of barristers,
Mm,
advocacy was what drew me in. Being a barrister is a real vocation. And a bit like if you are a keen or a talented musician and you watch an incredible performance, Royal Albert Hall or somewhere like that, and you are so absorbed in it and so in the moment, when advocacy is your thing and you are in court and you are watching somebody who is at the top of their game doing a masterful cross-examination or delivering a really compelling speech, you are completely in that moment. You are immersed in it. And it's really addictive. If it's the thing that you are drawn to, it is so compelling and so addictive. And that was what drew me in. It wasn't about the law so much as being that client's voice, speaking up and doing that job.
I remember it from when I was at university. We were encouraged to go and experience the court system. I mean, it's a while ago now, Anna, I'm not going to lie, but that it was when things weren't quite so creaky, I think. But was there a moment for you when you were because you studied at Cambridge, right? Did you get to go to court and go and watch advocates kind of doing their work on their feet? Was that something that you were encouraged to do at that time?
It was something we were definitely encouraged to do in our holidays, in our vacations. When we were studying, that was when I really fell in love with the law. And it
Right.
was in my first probably 3 weeks or so at university. And I remember preparing for those first supervisions and first lectures and getting reading lists with loads of cases on them. And until you go and study law, either at A level, which I didn't do, or as a degree,
Mm.
you've never really read full judgments, full cases before. You might have read reportings in the newspaper, or you may have read summaries online when you're preparing. But there is nothing like reading a full judgment and getting stuck into that case law. And I remember in those first sort of 3 weeks or so, what I felt happening was it was as if my brain was stretching. I was reading all these cases and I could feel my brain flexing and I could feel the connections between the cases, the statutes, the judgments sparking. And it was really exciting. And
Mm.
going through that process and then keeping it up, I think was what really told me that I was on the right path. And it's something that I still have the benefit of today, not in every case and not all of the time, but sometimes in a case you'll have a new point come up or a new argument being made or something that you've not come across or something particularly complex. And you go away and you do that legal research. And as you're reading the cases, reading the law, and really getting into the detail of the problem that you're grappling with, you feel your brain really stretching again. And that is exhilarating, it's stimulating. And it's something that I still benefit from today. It's carried through from university into my day job, which is a huge privilege.
Amazing. I love that idea of that. I think your brain's still forming, isn't it, in those kind of late teens and early 20 years as well. And I love that. What I just heard was that idea of your synapses kind of finding new kind of neural kind of pathways as it were, doing their job. I think that's amazing. It hadn't occurred to me before. That's what's going on when you're studying a new topic like that as well. I have to say I had the opposite experience when I went to university and very quickly decided that law wasn't going to be for me, and I resisted it for the next 4 years, as it were. Tell me, the profession can be, I think it's fair to say, pretty demanding, right? Because for all the reasons we know, it's, for an advocate as well, self-employed, you're on your feet, you've got to know the law, and you've got to be able to perform. What's the biggest challenge that you've faced over the course of that? Maybe when you were studying, or maybe when you were pupil. Tell me about that. What was the biggest challenge you faced, and what have you learned from it?
I think probably as a barrister, there are two main types of challenge that we face, and both of them will crop up fairly early on in your career, and that you learn to deal with them quite quickly, and then I think it's something that you carry on refining as you go on. And I think the first one is a practical challenge.
Mm,
The majority of barristers are self-employed. We work hard, we work long hours, we get briefs really late, we work into the night, we ride the adrenaline wave. And you have to learn how to manage that practically, because no matter how talented you are, no matter how resilient you are, or how much sleep you don't generally need, you can't work forever. You can't keep up the highest pace of work that you might take on. When I was really junior, I learned that the hard way, which is that I'd actually went beyond the boundary that I should have gone in terms of my
yeah,
diary, my practice management, and what I could realistically do and still perform at my best. Because everybody wants to always perform at their best. That's not something you ever want to compromise on. And when you are self employed, you have to learn how to make a lot of decisions about how you're going to manage your diary and how to take responsibility for it. And so I think quite often when people are really junior and starting out, they will have that moment where they go, do you know what? I have taken on more than I should have done. And it is time to phone the clerks and say, do you know what? I've gone a little bit too far here. I know that the next 3 weeks are going to be really, really tough. Please
yeah.
book me out of court after that. And it sounds not that important. And perhaps that's why often people do fall into this trap when they're just starting out. It's so important, and it is a real skill that you have to master, and it's one that will see you through your career. It's one that experienced barristers will still do sometimes. We'll turn to each other and they'll say, do you know what? I should have booked a day out of court to do my prep work this week. And you just have to learn that skill. So that's one of the challenges that I think we face, particularly at the bar, being self-employed. You have to take responsibility and you have to learn how to do it in the right way. The other thing that I think is really challenging about being a barrister is the emotional demands that the
Yeah.
job places on you, because
Mm,
and particularly in family law and in children law, you bear a lot of responsibility because you are there to be your client's voice in court.
yeah.
Your client gets one chance at that.
Yeah.
And these are some of the most important decisions and important cases that anyone will ever go to court for. In public law children, some of these cases involve adoption. They can involve the adoption of very young babies. And what you have to do again is find a way to manage the responsibility that that places upon you. Now, from my point of view, that responsibility is worth it because of the huge privilege that comes with the job. And I expect that's true of most barristers. Why on earth would we do it otherwise? It's a
Mm.
real position to put yourself into. But you do have to manage that demand of the job in order to have a sustainable and fulfilling practice.
Have you found, thank you for sharing all that. It's just wonderful. I think it's a real insight into the machinations of your day-to-day life, as it were. Has clerking kind of improved and got better and evolved over the years to help support you on both of those two elements, the diary management and also the need for that kind of mental well-being space to kind of reset after you've taken on a few of these cases? Is clerking getting better?
I am really fortunate in that I've always been supported by a really good clerking team. And in
Yeah.
fact, clerks who serve me now are the same clerks largely who served me when I was starting out.
Right.
And it goes the other way as well. I serve them. I have a really good relationship with my clerks, and you're absolutely on the money. It's essential. In the beginning, when you're starting out, you have to build the confidence, I think, often to say to the clerks, I feel comfortable with that, or I don't feel comfortable with that. Um, I'm a bit worried about how much work I've got on that week. Can we have a look at maybe whether we can, does that conference need to take place then? Or do I actually have more time for it if we move it to another day? And can we say, well, actually, let's move that around? And that is a relationship that if you have a good barrister clerking relationship, it will get better over time as well, and you'll build upon it. I think probably one of the things about clerking that has changed in recent years is we have a lot of open discussion about well-being and what's important to us as barristers.
Yeah.
Again, I'm really fortunate that that has always been a bit of an important part of my practice. But I have regular practice review meetings with my clerks, and every time we discuss what I want from my career. And whereas perhaps traditionally, and in courtroom dramas that you might watch on TV, you get the impression that the clerks are really driving, really pushing the barristers to always, take the next brief, go to court, do the next thing, go travel a long way, take the next case. I think there probably has been a shift away from that, and there is more of a question being asked of how will you perform best, and what do you want? What compromises do you want to make? I'm really fortunate that my clerks will say to me, don't worry about being in court any more than you want to. This is your choice and this is your time. If at the moment your priority is being at sports day, at being at the Christmas play, at being, wherever it may be, taking off time in the school holidays, do it. You will not get that time back.
Mm.
We will help you have a career that is as fulfilling and as busy and as stimulating as you want it to be. And I suspect that that is probably a change across the board. It's a really important question to ask of barristers, and it's a really important dialogue to have with the clerks as well. And that is something that probably hasn't always been the case at the bar.
And the subject matter, as you said, I mean, it's given the things that you do for a living and the kind of cases that you work on as well, both public and private. Have you, do you think you've got better over the years of compartmentalizing or allowing that space for yourself to kind of go away and I don't know, Anna, is it rude for me to ask? Do you shed a tear? Do you have those moments about the things that you work on? Is that okay to ask? I mean,
Absolutely. And it's something that I always talk actually to people who come to court with me who are thinking about a career at the bar. I've been asked that question by somebody who could see how invested I was in the case that I was running. And she just said to me, I identify as a student as quite a sensitive person. And I wonder whether you identify as a sensitive person and how you deal with that.
right.
And it's something ever since being asked that question, I always try and make sure it's a topic that I cover with people who are thinking about a career at the bar, because we should absolutely be open about it. There are cases where I have cried on the train home afterwards. There are cases where I have lied awake in bed thinking about the children afterwards. Quite often, that'll be in particular if I've represented or done a case involving a really vulnerable teenager. Quite often, those are the ones that really keep you awake at night. And it's really hard to turn off from it. But the reality is, it's not always easy to turn off from it because you care. These are children and these are
Yeah.
people. So what I always say is, it's really important to approach cases in a professional manner, and we must never compromise that. But it is also really important to empathize with the families and to acknowledge that the things that we are dealing with are really sad and really difficult. And it is okay sometimes to have a moment on the train when you just think, that was so sad.
Yeah.
That was really sad for that person. And we've all done a good job. And perhaps it's the right outcome, for the child or for the parent or whoever it is that you're thinking about, but it's still really sad. And I think unless you acknowledge that sometimes, you can't acknowledge the importance of the work that you're doing. Now, you would never want that to become unmanageable. You would never want to feel like it's taking over or you can't manage your job. But like most things, I think there probably is a balance to be struck. There is a degree of compartmentalizing. Sometimes that comes easily because actually, regardless of the outcome, you've done a good job and the client was pleased. Sometimes clients will be pleased that they've had their say, even if
Yeah.
they've lost. And I think sometimes the best way to overcome feeling that the emotions are perhaps getting a bit too heavy is to say, I did my job. And whatever happens to my client, whatever happens to that family now, they know that I did absolutely everything that I could. I was their voice. All the arguments that could sensibly be run have been run. All the points that were good points have been made. And if the outcome is not the one that they were looking for, then that decision is on the judge, on the magistrates, and that's something that we can explore together. But we've done what we can, and sometimes it's easier to then close the laptop at the end of the day and think, well, it's sad, but I put absolutely everything into that. I think it's not necessarily something that actually gets easier over time. I know a lot of barristers, particularly children barristers, will say once they've had children or they've taken on caring responsibilities for a relative or gone through a divorce, it actually sometimes can make it harder to compartmentalize because you might draw parallels with struggles that you've got in your own personal life. And when you feel that connection between something that happens in your life and something that's happening in a case, that can actually make it harder to turn off from. So it's something that I don't think probably disproportionately affects the junior end. I think the more you gather life experience and the more you encounter difficulties in your own life, sometimes the harder it then becomes to compartmentalize. So I think it's something we all have to work on.
Well, we'll all have to look after our children barristers a bit better then, if that's the case. Speaking of which, are there things that we could do in the system, do you think, to help the system be a bit more child friendly? Are there immediate wins and gains that we could make by, I don't know. I mean, I've had some personal experience of the court system where there are some elements of things that are surprising. I think in the adoption process where kids can go to court and they have a definite moment in court and they understand what's happening in their life. I think it's a lovely and very human kind of moment, as it were, as well. But are there other things that we could do to improve the process?
Absolutely. I think, first of all, I shared this week actually on LinkedIn a new toolkit for judges, which is about writing to children. And it's something that isn't done as a matter of course in children
Right.
proceedings. But I suspect after this toolkit has been released, it's much more likely to become part of what we do when we finish.
I think I've read one of those letters. They're mind-blowingly good when you read one as well. Yeah. Okay.
They're really, really important. And I think the other thing that we need to do in the court system to improve outcomes for children is address chronic underfunding. And that
Mm.
is underfunding both in the court system, but also in children's social care. Because at the moment, we go to court, and when we are looking particularly at older children or teenagers, there is a real lack of appropriate accommodation, either children's homes or secure accommodation. And this is not new information. If you're in the system, you know it. And a number of judges have done their very best to try and deliver judgments which can be shared online. And there has been some press coverage of it as well. But in my work, I haven't really seen an improvement since I started at the bar about 13 years ago to now. What I've seen is a problem that is escalating.
Mm.
The provision of children's accommodation is it's often provided by private providers. It's not local authority. They're not local authority owned properties, and so the local authority has to choose between private providers, who sometimes charge a significant amount of money to accommodate these children, and because there aren't enough places available and never enough secure places available, what we find as practitioners is we go to court without options that we want to put forward and discuss. On some cases, we are going to court and saying, we've spoken to 130 providers and none of them is able to or willing to offer a place to this child because there's no space, or the combination of children they've already got in that home make it unsuitable to introduce this particular child to, or geographically that's prohibitive because it's going to really, really impact on the relationship between the child and their parents or other family members, which everyone agrees is so important to their well-being, and the likely outcomes for that child. So that's the other thing that I would change about the court system for children at the moment, is actually that we would have better options, as a result of properly funded children's accommodation.
Amazing. I love that. And I'd like to come back and revisit that toolkit idea with you as well. I think there's something that we can do together on that and try and promote it a bit more as well. It's really important to me. A double pointed question, I guess, two parts to this. Do you speak kind of youth? And if you do, can you explain your job to a 12-year-old in, like, 2 sentences? Is that something that you can do linguistically?
So I'm not sure if I speak youth, but what I always do try and do, including at court, is speak straightforwardly. It's really important that we use accessible language, particularly when we are dealing with vulnerable families. And in some of the cases I do, we're also dealing with families who may have cognitive difficulties, parents who've got other challenges. So it is really important. And having said that, you can be the judge of whether I'm any good at it.
It's very accessible, your language. I mean, it's very
Accessible
accessible.
language. So in 3 sentences, I would probably say, 1, sometimes things go badly wrong for families, and the parents or a social worker can ask the court to decide what the arrangements should be for a child. As a barrister, my job is to represent the parents or the social worker or the child to make sure that their case is put forward at its absolute highest. I do that through a combination of advising them about the case and the likely outcome, questioning witnesses to overcome the challenges in my client's case, and then hopefully making a really persuasive speech at the end of a trial called closing submissions.
I love it. Yeah, that accessibility of your language and the way that you speak as well, do you think that's what, because you rank very highly in the linked influencers uh, rankings for barristers, right, that we put together. Do you think that that accessibility in your language is something that helps the general public in general to read your posts and access them? And, given that we've got fleeting kind of attention spans on social media, any thoughts on that?
I hope so. My view is it's really important. And I think one of the things that social media offers barristers actually is an opportunity to demonstrate those skills and probably debunk some of the myths that there are about who is a barrister and what makes a good barrister, and gives everyone an opportunity to think really critically about what the service is that's being offered and what we should be asking of our barristers. I consider it really important that what we do is accessible to the general public. And it's probably pretty obvious in family law why. There are lots of questions about transparency and what it is that the family court is doing. And we are dealing with families. They are human beings, they are real people. So, who needs to understand what we're saying best of all? It's the people. It's all very well if I go to court and I run an argument that's a really good argument, but I do it in a way that leaves my client not really understanding what I've said on their behalf. If I am a good advocate, I can run that argument just as persuasively using only language that my client can understand. And they can go home at the end of the day and they can know that I said X, Y, and Z because they could follow every single sentence. I shouldn't need to rely on language that is inaccessible to anybody in order to win a case. If my points are good, I can say them easily.
I love that. At university, I once won a moot and didn't know I'd won the moot. Because the decision was so shrouded in language that I just couldn't understand that, yeah, my team won the moot, but didn't know we'd won. So yeah,
That's exactly
it
it.
was a Pyrrhic victory, let's put it that way. Have you had a moment in courtroom that you thought, flipping, this could be just straight off the telly, could be straight from a drama? Have you had one of those, prima facie kind of moments or whatever you think, wow?
I have. I expect everybody has. Everyone will have a story to tell. I've had 2. I've had the confession and I've had the feint. So the confession is a really difficult one to manage. Um, and what I learned when I was very junior and this first happened to me was you can sometimes see it coming. You can have read the papers and you can have thought you knew what was going on. And the moment you lay eyes on that individual, you know something's about to change. You know something is different. Every client that comes to court is nervous. But sometimes there is a moment before the 3 words come out of their mouth, which is, I did it. where you just know that's what's going to happen. So I have had that situation. I've also had the faint, and that was more recent. I was cross-examining. I was asking the questions of an expert, and the expert fainted in the witness box. And I know that if I'd been watching that unfold on TV, I'd have been cheering it on. I'd have been going, "Yes, oh, it's great. That's exactly what that barrister wanted to do. That witness, oh, it, she's fainted." And actually, when you're in the moment, it's dreadful. It's a really, really awful moment, and it doesn't really play out like it does on TV, save for, I suppose, my client, who offered the comedy line afterwards, after we'd sorted it all out, after we'd looked after the witness, and actually after we got back up on our feet. We finished the day, everyone's fine at the end of it. I sit down with my client, and she just said to me, "I bet your husband never wins an argument." And I thought, there's the line. That's the line straight from the TV. It wasn't my questions. It's the client at the end of it who'd sat through it all. But yeah, there are dramatic moments at court. The stakes are high, and I expect that's part of what leads into these high drama moments. Not every day is like silk.
Have you ever sat in that seat? Have you ever been on the expert witness side, or someone who's been in court and done that? Because I have to say, I have. I had to do it during lockdown, and I had to fly to Scotland, and it is rough. I've been chair of the jury, and I've done that, and I would much prefer to spend half my time as chair of the jury than do that ever again. It was awful. So
I
yeah,
think being a barrister is the easiest job in the room.
maybe, maybe nobody wants to be, cross-examined. It is brutal, brutal as well. Even when you've got nothing to, say, it's just, yeah. Well, there we go. I love the fact that maybe I should share that more and ask people what their stories are about that moment they've had in court as well. Um, does it reflect on the barrister when somebody kind of changes their plea in that moment or says those words? Does the judge understand? Are they empathetic with the barrister there, and they think, well, okay, there's nothing you can do about that? Are they okay with it?
As a barrister, our biggest duty is to the court.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that people often forget as well. As a barrister, I cannot mislead the court. So if a client says to me, "I've done that," I can't go into court and say they haven't done it. I'm not allowed to. I'm bound by a really strict ethical code. And so it's something that is actually very reassuring as a barrister. There is a clear line that I will not cross. What it's really important to do, I think, in that situation is not to let that adrenaline wave flood in. All you can do as the barrister is just think to yourself, okay, that's what my client is saying. First of all, I need to think to myself, and this is what the judge will expect of me as well. I need to think really carefully. Is the witness saying this because it is the truth? Or is there another reason that the witness might be saying it? For example, influenced by somebody else.
Protect someone, or yeah, agree.
Exactly. So what I would hope in that situation is that any judge would acknowledge that's what's happened. We've all heard it, and we're all going to have to deal with it, and we're going to deal with it properly. And that is what it means to do your job and to carry on doing your job in that moment. You can't coach your witnesses. Your job is not to tell them what the right answer is to different questions. You do your job by preparing them and then dealing with whatever comes out in the witness box, and making sure that you give your client proper care afterwards as well. So that is what I would hope the judge would think in that moment when the confession lands or when the landscape really shifts in a case. Fine, we're all going to work now to address that issue, tackle it head on, and see where it takes us.
Do you think that duty to the court is the one that the public has the greatest misconception around with barristers? I mean, we've all got influenced by television programs and movies and Netflix as well as to how it is in the profession. Do you think that ultimate responsibility that you, as somebody who's been called to the bar, is the thing that the public gets wrong most?
I think it probably is that, and the cab rank rule. It's about who we represent as well. People are often surprised when I say, well, I am ethically bound to accept a case no matter how strong the case is, no matter how weak the case is. I do not discriminate. If I am qualified and competent to take a case and there is availability in my diary, the case goes in. It is not for me to choose the clients that I represent. And that's a really important core duty as well. So I think those two things probably are the things that the public don't expect necessarily. They know, I often get asked, well, how can you go to court and how can you represent people that you disagree with, or people who want an outcome that you think is fundamentally wrong? And it's always the same answer. It's the cab rank rule. I am that client's voice. It's not for me to judge them. My job is to put forward the case in the exact same way that they would if they had the skills, the knowledge, the experience that I do. I am their voice. And then it's for the judge, it's for the court to decide what the outcome is. And if the outcome is as plainly obvious as probably the question assumes, that the client has done wrong or whatever it is, the judge will notice. It's not my responsibility to decide right or wrong. I can give advice about likely outcomes. I can give advice about what I can see as pitfalls to arguments, what the obstacles might be, why an outcome might be wrong. But it's the client's choice at the end of the day. And as long as I abide by all of my ethical duties, that is the case that I will run.
I found the more time I spend with the bar, thank you for that. I've found the more time that I spend with the bar, the more modern it is when you get into it. Like you're dealing with the cutting edge of what's happening in society, right? And do you think that collectively the bar could do a better job at presenting itself as the modern function it is? Because a lot of the gowns and wigs and there's things about the system that are quite archaic looking, but the reality is it's actually like, no, this is the heartbeat of society today. And I always find that dichotomy a bit of a weird one. I don't know if am I making sense, Anna? I don't know.
You are, and it's something that I spend time thinking about, if I'm honest, because I am a huge advocate for social mobility. And I well appreciate that at first glance, the wigs, the gowns, the traditions, all of that could be alienating. And they could give an impression which, like you say, perhaps might not reflect what's going on in the ground. I actually don't object to all of those things. I don't object to the ceremony. I don't object to the customs. And I think the reason is this. When you are a barrister, it is really important to remember that the job that you are doing is much bigger than you as the individual.
Mm.
There is a common thread which ties all barristers together and has done over hundreds of years, and that is a commitment to the rule of law. It is a commitment to all of the ethical duties that we are bound by as barristers. And it's also a reflection of the fact that no matter whether you are male or female, no matter whether you identify as white or black or ethnic minority or as LGBTQ+, actually, the thing that connects all barristers is qualities like integrity, intellect, moral courage, a commitment to doing right and promoting justice in your cases. And sometimes by acknowledging that there is something that connects us all, that can also help to enhance social mobility. And sometimes when you are sitting in a room, in a ceremony or some really special occasion, and you are surrounded by all of those traditions and it's all en masse, sometimes it is a really poignant reminder of the fact that whatever journey anyone has had to get to the bar, it is a hard journey and it requires a huge degree of commitment. And there are some things that connect all of us. So I have no objection actually to keeping a huge number of those traditions. I think probably the most archaic thing about the bar at the moment is the gender pay gap. And that is something that we all need to commit to addressing. We all need to address diversity at the bar. A colleague of mine, who I'm very grateful to, pointed out also the intersectionality between the gender pay gap and the race pay gap at the bar.
The double penalty there is just absolutely huge.
Exactly. So those are the things that we, in my opinion, we should focus our energy on addressing in terms of what's old-fashioned. The number of female silks. Let's channel our energy into all of those things and recognize the customs and traditions as something that reflect the hard work that goes into becoming a barrister and what unites us. And it may be that others have a different view about that. I think it's something probably there will be ongoing discussion and debate about. But at the moment, having reflected on it myself, that's the conclusion that I've come to.
Yeah, I love it. I love that idea of celebrating the tradition, but also celebrating the modernity. It's about getting that balance right between the two things as well. Last question for me then. So, either if you could go back in time and advise your younger self, or probably more importantly, could you advise someone who's a future barrister today? What one piece of advice would you give them that's going to really hold them in good stead for the rest of their career?
The advice that I would give to either myself as a student or a student who is studying now is it is worth it. I think it's something really important to hold in mind when you are doing a job or trying to do a job which is demanding, which
Mm.
requires a huge amount of commitment and a huge amount of study, and then continues to be demanding. The journey to become a barrister is not easy, nor should it be. The job is not easy. As long as it is a fair journey, it is entirely appropriate that it is rigorous, that you will spend time worrying about it, that you will commit hours to researching it. And what I would want everybody to remember is it is so worth it when you get there.
It's quite clear from the way that you speak about it as well. That's, important to you, and I love that. It's so genuine, and it comes across on the screen immediately. And thank you so much for joining us for this edition. I hope it goes far and wide. I really do, and I believe it's going to. If you've watched this edition and you like what Anna's got to say, please can you share it with your friends and share it off to other people? We should be proud of what she does for a living. And then, if you like it enough for yourself, then either subscribe on Spotify or wherever you like to as well. To But Is It Legal? It's quite nice to have our own podcast, really, celebrating the voices from the legal world. So, Anna, thank you again for all the work that you do and for coming on today as well. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. It's been wonderful.